Welcome to Business Line's State of the Economy podcast, where you'll find insight, analysis, and the story behind the numbers.
Hello and welcome to Business Line and a new edition of our State of Marketing podcast. We have with us well-known management thinker Shiv Shivakumar, former chairperson and CEO of Pepsico India and former CEO of Nokia India. Also, we have Shankar Prasad, founder of D2C beauty brand Plum, which started in 2014. Interestingly, both Shiv and Shankar have Unilever in common in their resumes. In today's episode, we are going to focus on direct-to-consumer brands. During the pandemic, D2C brands were the real darling of consumers as they were speedy, agile, and understood the consumer pulse far better than the big brands. We saw them spotting white spaces, carving out new niches, and engaging with the consumer in refreshing new ways. They completely rewrote the marketing playbook, I would say. But 3 years later, we find that the big brands have caught up. They also have D2C models now. They are also engaging with consumers in innovative new ways. Plus, the old channels have opened up again and retail is back. So now that the trump cards are gone, how are D2C brands doing? So let me first ask Shiv, who always has a very good bird's eye view on trends, what he thinks of the D2C brands phenomena. Shiv, D2C brands really stormed the market during the pandemic, but is their dominance over? What is your view?
Yeah, thank you, Chitra, and wonderful to be here along with Shankar doing this show. The first thing is, you mentioned that D2C brands started with the pandemic. Yeah, that's true. And I just want to set out one thing, how I see the definition of D2C. A D2C brand means that you're bypassing the middleman and you do not have anything physical as an intermediary. So in the pandemic, you're absolutely right. A lot of D2C brands came into the picture. But is D2C new? It is not new at all. It's 50 years old, believe it or not, Chitra. 50 years ago, if you read the history of Indian marketing, the two D2C brands which are there were Reader's Digest and Bulwarker, who used to send direct to the consumer. Okay, so in a sense, we are rediscovering D2C in the way people are defining it 50 years later. The manual of what Reader's Digest as well as Bulwarker wrote for us. If you look at D2C, what happens in the past, in a physical world, D2C is determined by the consumer's ability to pick your advertising, the retailer's ability to pick that product or brand or SKU and keep it on a shelf, or your ability to go and see it on the shelf and take it and ask for it. Okay, so that's how it was determined. In today's world, consumers pick it off, the net. It could be word of mouth, it could be friends, it could be reviews, it could be any number of things. So that's how D2C is defined today. So I would say that, yes, big brands are coming back in a sense, what you mentioned, but I don't think any brand survives if it doesn't do one basic thing, which is every brand has a promise it makes to the consumer. As long as you stick to the promise and you exceed that promise, nobody can beat you. And I think that's what you really need to think about. Whether you're any type of brand, a brand is about a promise, and never forget that. That's all I would say.
Yeah, that's an important lesson there. Shankar, as a practicing D2C brand and a successful one at that, your take on it, because we've seen D2C brands getting acquired post-pandemic because in the race to scale, I think, and also because, as I said, the play field is more level now. Your take on the landscape today.
So my take is, there are echoes of what I think in what Shiv just said. To me, it's first and foremost about the consumer. The consumer looks for products, looks for brands, has needs that are met by brands that make products. Very simply, it's a 101 or even the pre-101 of what we're talking about here. And the means of doing that, the means of reaching the message and the means of reaching the product to the consumer have evolved over a period of time. Whether it was Reader's Digest example that you gave, or whether it was telemarketing that started, or the TV shopping channels that started out. There are multiple means to get to the consumer. There are door-to-door salesmen that used to exist way back last century or the century before that. So it's really about the means of getting the message and the product into the hand of the consumer. India has always been a very retail heavy, and that too unorganized retail heavy country, and that I think that continues to this day. Modern retail really tried to make that impact in the first decade of the century, and partly has been successful, but the unorganized nature of the trade has stayed. I think what happened I would say the story is even pre-pandemic. What happened really in the mid around 2013, 14 era, which is when we coincidentally started out, is that bandwidth availability on mobile phone, the cost of bandwidth for consumption of content just plummeted thanks to handset costs coming down, telecom costs coming down, and then it just the whole supply and demand sort of side of it both started going up. Content creators started coming out, marketplaces started coming out, and then the brand happened. And therefore, I think what happened even pre-pandemic was a lot of this was set in motion. You see, Nika was started in 2012, and when we came on board, Nika was still small. We onboarded in Nika in 2015. They were still smallish. I won't say small, but smallish compared to where they are now. So a lot of this was set in motion back then because of access to online content being made available on the supply side as well as demand. And I think what the pandemic really did was really created that acceleration phase for a lot of brands across categories. And to me, therefore, it's the story is really about consumers, brands, and products rather than D2C as a vertical in itself. It definitely is an interesting arbitrage, if I can use that word, to get to the consumer. But as you said, no arbitrage exists forever. It always gets, the perfect market takes over. And that's what we are seeing happen. The story is therefore, and we like to use the term digitally native brands rather than D2C brands because, as you said, D2C is no longer strictly D2C. We are using all kinds of platforms and marketplaces and even retail to get it. It's really about digitally native brands rather than D2C brands.
Okay, got it. Taking off from what you've said, this digitally native or direct to consumer on online platforms, certain
Right.
categories have done really well. I mean, we've seen beauty, fashion, food, and pet care also surprisingly do very well. And you're in the beauty space.
Right.
Is this because these categories also followed another big trend, which is the rise of influencers? Did that help? I mean, because that was a different type of marketing again, which big brands
Yeah.
normally, I mean, big brands have brand endorsers and a different route, but here you have
Right.
micro influencers. How much does that have, I mean, to play?
I think the influencer is a subset of what I would call content. I think if I live and breathe in the beauty industry, so all my examples are fortunately or fortunately from the beauty space. So if you look at how, for example, Nika happened on the scene and made people buy makeup online, it was driven a lot by content initially, and a lot of that content was even in-house produced by Nika. And I think the availability of bandwidth at the consumer end and hardware at the producer end made the influencers happen. Initially, it was sort of the mega influencer, and then it went all the way to micro, nano, and whatnot. It just basically is people moving away from written material to visual content, which is far more easily bite-sized consumed and across languages and across sort of strata of society. So you don't need to be a sort of English reader in order to be able to understand what a vitamin C serum does to you. I think the reels are doing an excellent job of educating and communicating people. So definitely, as you said, content led by influencers has played a major role in the growth of D2C brands and even other platforms over the last decade or so, which in a manner of speaking almost democratized access to content. Earlier it was, and way back, I'm talking about 20, 30 years back, it was all TV content which required an expensive production agency and ad agency and whatnot to produce. Now that has been democratized in the hands of millions of people and influencers and brands. So it's all sort of a very different playing field, if you will, that's happening right.
Okay. Thank you. Shiv, your take on this,
Yeah.
I mean, on both on the categories that will do well on D2C as well as, have big brands manage to learn something from D2C or, the playbook changing, your take on that.
Yeah, the first thing I would say is I think we've had platforms before,
Mhm.
but there were platforms like mail order. If you remember in the 1900s, there was Sears, there was Burlington in India, lots of people who had mail order, then you mail ordered and then it went directly to you. But that had a particularly limiting range of products and offerings. When you look at D2C, a lot of people say direct to consumer, and I would agree with Shankar that some things have changed. The way I define D2C is discovery to consumption. I think that's the fundamental thing which has changed. The ability of the consumer to discover, the ability of the brand to make consumers discover themselves, and the ability to lead from the discovery journey to a consumption journey. I think that whole journey is much shorter today than it was ever before. Now, you mentioned that you have beauty, you have food, you have fashion, you have pet care, etc. If you think of what's worked and why it has worked, I think the first thing is every category which needed education works very well in this type of format. Okay, beauty requires a hell of a lot of education. In the past, the best education we offered was an innovation which was started in Calcutta shops, which was the beauty assistant in the shop. That was the biggest innovation which was there. Calcutta was the starting point. Now a lot of the big outlets have beauty assistants. So education is very important. Second thing which is very important is, can this be a subscription model? I buy something regularly, so why do I need to go to a retail outlet regularly to buy it? A good example of that is diapers. More than 42% of India's diaper sale happen online. Okay, the reason being it's a regular item, the baby needs it, etc. Sanitary napkins will get there very, very soon in my book. The third reason why it happens is a certain degree of personalization. So it could be because you have a niche type of a category, or it is something which only you require. Maybe your skin tone is different, your hair tone is different, your nails are different, your body size is different. So there's a certain degree of personalization which not all outlets can ever carry in a physical world. Fourth reason why this works is regime. Beauty is another good example for that. When you have a particular regime, you tend to stick to a brand when you pick it and you have the whole lot which works for you. And physical space is becoming extremely costly and challenging. And hence people are opting, even, medium brands or whatever it is. And the last one I would say is categories which have never had any retail space, like pet care. Okay, zero retail space. Okay, or even some degree of hardware, some degree of do-it-yourself products. Okay, now what happens with each of these? Because there is no outlet, you don't even know where it exists. In the pandemic, the number of pet owners increased dramatically. So obviously, you needed a place where you could shop, and pet care online is a great option. So these are the various reasons why it has worked. And it's not that it won't work for big brands. Big brands traditionally, and I will cover that. If you look at the three big trends, all the big companies have consistently missed it. Okay, the smaller FMCG companies have got onto it. Television in 1984, all the big companies missed it. It was Vico Vajrantri and Richardson Wicks at that point of time who caught it. Okay, next is when modern trade came in, all the big companies thought that they were enemies of their business and hence didn't want to deal with them. Similarly, when digital came in, none of the big companies even woke up. So big companies have hibernation or a sleep over period when they don't do anything. And that's the time when nimble, smart brands do well. And that's what also happened in the pandemic.
Okay, so is that advantage going to hold on? I mean, you in your columns in Businessline, the ones that forecast trends for the year, have kind of hinted that D2C brands will be acquired. So do you think a great big consolidation is going to happen?
So here's the thing. If you just hear the narrative of big consumer companies and their leaders, they're feeding you a lot of gullible stuff which media picks up and doesn't even challenge. All these people have told you, we have split India into 11, we split India into 10 to read better habits, etc. It's absolutely wrong. Let me explain why. There are no 10 types of oil based on different country needs. There are no 10 types of soap. There are no 10 types of blends. Okay, it's the same product. When an FMCG company tells you we've split the country into 10, they have done it to break span. They've done it to get better execution. Nothing to do with consumer habit and consumption of product. That is where the big difference is right now, thanks to what I call the discovery and the consumption of the D2C model. Now you can actually service any niche in any part of the country. So irrespective of the number of pin codes you have, you can target a product for that. And in a way, the government has done that already by doing the one district, one product. Okay, that platform is possibly the best platform where people will discover their district's product, and the 700 odd districts in India will, with ONDC and everything else, pick up that product category later on. So my own thing to you would be, again, I go back. If a brand is good, if a brand delivers, consumers will always center around that brand. And the economics of the brand and the economics of running that brand and the economics of buying that brand will then determine whether D2C stays or doesn't stay.
Yeah, that makes sense. Shankar, what about you? I mean, a lot of your contemporaries in search of scale have joined hands or partnered with big brands.
Right.
So what do you see? How do you see this playing out? Because scale is important at the end of the day.
See, the way I see it is, and you will see it even in Western market, which sort of foretell what happens, not always, but in many ways foretell what happens in markets like us. You need a certain minimum scale in order to be able to, do certain things. For example, make minimum production batches, afford certain types of agencies, afford certain types of supply chain, let's say, capabilities, get some weightage in the retailer's mind, for example. So these are all some things which are important. And I would say broadly the number that I would put there in terms of a minimum scale, I'm sort of sticking my neck out here, but I'll do that nonetheless, is about 100 to 150 crores. If you're getting to 100, 150 crore number annually in terms of revenue, you're probably getting into the zone where you are past the minimum scale requirement along the dimensions that I mentioned. After that, it is a matter of choice, if you ask me. If you run your shop well, then you'll probably grow the 150, let's say, into a 200, 225 in 3 to 5 years time. If you're running it well, you're probably doing a 15, 20, 25% EBITDA, depending on how well you run it. That's good economics for somebody to run a business. Now, the question that happens is twofold. I mean, is it the sole founder who's sort of build it up to a 200 crores? In most cases, not. There are VC funds and other types of investors who are part of this cap table, and therefore they will have prerogatives in terms of exits and so on and so forth. Therefore, it is not a story of, okay, I scale it to 200 and it just continues to run along a 10-15% growth every year after that and stuck out 10% PAT margin for the founder to take home. It's not, unfortunately, that. In the West, a lot of brands are still like that. Out here, unfortunately, because of the way the capital markets are structured, because the way, for example, lending is a problem to smaller businesses, now VCs have filled in the gap, which is not necessarily bad. But what it also means is that there is a churn on the cap table, which is induced right from the word go, by design almost. And therefore, you see a lot of these M&As happening. That's number one. Number two, realistically speaking, how many brands are making a 15, 20, 25% EBITDA beyond 200 crores? Which the number is a handful. Several of them are profitable, but they are not self-sustainingly profitable yet. It will be a few more years before they become that, and that includes us. The reality is you don't have brands today which fit the criteria that I just described in order to be able to exist independently. Then comes the question of, okay, so what happens? What happens then is you have M&As happening, you have consolidation, you have house of brands happening. So these are all ways and means for us to answer the question of what happens once you reach a certain minimum scale. But again, I'll go back to, and I think it resonates so well with what you were saying. If the brand is delivering on what it is promising something that people value, then you will find, whether it is part of a house, whether it is on your own, whether it is as a PCP invested company, you will continue to find reason to exist and a very, very good reason to exist. And a very, very good reason for your shareholders, whoever they are, to support your existence independently. And I think that is what brands need to come to.
Wow.
I would add,
Yeah,
Chitra,
Shiv.
to this that if you look at the situation, you need capital. Okay, when you are a startup or whatever you're doing, you need capital, you need good people, and you need a certain capability in that category of where you're operating. If that is attractive, then a big brand will, over a point of time, or a big company will want to pick you for the people and the capability, not for the capital, because the big company will always have capital. Okay, that's the first point. Second, and a very important point I want to make is that all these new brands, what I call the discovery to consumption brands, all these new brands must behave like small brands. Behave like small brands means be very frugal with your money. Okay, mercilessly attack the market and the leader like a gorilla. That's when you will do very well. Unfortunately, what you see today, and I wrote this for you, is that a lot of these small brands are behaving like big brands. And that is a fundamental mistake they're making. When they behave like a big brand, when they throw economics out of the window, all they're interested in is blowing up money in order to acquire customers, etc. That is never a slope which will ever last or is lasting. So small brands must behave like small brands. Small brands must look big in consumers' mind, but not waste money. Okay, that comes by being a thought leader in the niche that you truly attack.
Okay, this is very valuable lessons for small brands here, I think, This also, I think I'll also, since we are running out of time, let me get to the final question, which is on, everybody is worried about the economic climate and the inflation, kind of inflationary pressures which are there. Big brands are still okay, but typically, D2C brands, which are in the marketplace, most of their products are premium. Because they ride on digital, they're by very nature premium. Do you think that inflationary climate is going to affect the small brands or the D2C brands more than the big brands? And there has to be and will there be a pricing strategy, we think? This question is open to both of you.
Again, if I talk about the beauty industry, we see prestige brands have existed in the beauty industry forever, right? So I'm talking of a jar of cream for anywhere upwards of 3,000, 5,000, 6,000 rupees. Such brands have existed forever now in the industry, and they continue to exist. Now, at the mass end of the scale, what we have seen happen is the mass brands have also been compelled to increase pricing or drop grammage in order to maintain margins, which has been consistently happening over the last several quarters. I see that it is sort of slowing down a little bit now, but it is definitely what goes up in pricing never often comes down. It probably stays the same. So what that has meant is brands like us, which are in the middle, actually are offering a lot of value. To be very specific, let's say a tube of face wash today is probably 150 rupees, give or take, even from a mass brand that is operating. It's no longer at a 70, 80 rupees. Now, we are, let's say, at a 350 rupees or 299 rupees. What we are talking about is not a huge gap in terms of the pricing. I'm not talking 1,000 rupees for a tube of face wash. We are talking within the 100 rupees. Now, if you look at somebody that I was chatting with mentioned a very beautiful point the other day that an auto rickshaw ride in Mumbai is probably 100 rupees. A pizza ordering for two is probably 600, 700 rupees, which lasts half an hour of, consumption. Whereas the face wash you buy is probably a month to 6 weeks of good facial glow that you are getting and taking care of your skin. So we really see the equation when it comes to beauty, especially at a price point of 4, 5, 600 rupees, it still makes a lot of sense to the consumer for the quality. Of course, you have to offer quality at 400 rupees. I can't offer the same on 150 rupee product at 400 and expect that you will pay the premium for it. If I'm able to offer the value at 400 rupees consistently, then there's definitely a play. I don't think the economic climate is forcing people to downtrade. People typically, these are the last things that people downtrade as long as you offer value. That's my view.
No, but is beauty
yeah.
an essential product? Would you, if you're only going to put essentials, would they sacrifice the beauty product? Is it now getting into the essential category?
Okay, so two things. It is in certain cases, it is getting into essentials categories. For example, take sunscreen, right? Now, a lot of people are now thinking sunscreen is an essential. Well, by the way, it is. Once you are into the habit of consuming beauty products and you see the upside of that, chances are you will continue to watch it as essential. That on the one is on the consumer side. On the economy side, thankfully, and I'm touching wood here, we are not in a situation where people are having to cut out things from their menu yet. Hopefully, we've seen the worst of inflation, we've seen the worst of all macroeconomic shocks that COVID and everything has unleashed. So, if you look at the consumer story as far as India goes, I still don't see a major stress point as I see it, and I really hope here that I'm right. Nothing good here, nobody can predict the future, but even as we stand today, we don't see that problem. A lot of the problem happens when you are not able to offer value at the price point that you are looking to command. And there,
Okay.
even we have had to take corrections.
Okay, great. I think it's very reassuring to hear from a marketer that you don't see a problem at this point. Shiv, your take on?
Yeah, I would say that in any economic system, you'll always have wastage in the system. Okay, let me give you one category. Let's take apparel. Apparel boys and girls are consistently running end of season sale, end of reason sale, all kinds of things. More than 25% of their product or merchandise of the year is consistently on sale, 40% off, 50% off, buy three, buy two, etc. So if you look at that category, they have trimmed down the discounts and ensured that they have tried to stay profitable at whatever level they are. Okay, so that's one. Second is, whenever you are in a jam, I think the middleman also is smart enough, whether it's a big company or a small company, if you're using physical retail, he knows which brands move, and those brands is willing to take a lower margin as long as it's moving fast. It's only when a brand doesn't sell that he wants higher margins, as a result of which your margins get squeezed again and again. The third one I would say is revenue management is very, very basic in a digital world, very basic. Revenue management in a large company is about pack price schedule, is having variants and things like that. In a digital world, you can adjust your price almost every hour. You can adjust it in the morning, you can adjust it in the afternoon. And you can actually find out demand occasions, demand consumption moments, and trigger your pricing for that. And that's the only way that you can manage it. So that's what I would say. In fact, the tools of managing pricing are favoring today's, discovery to consumption brands more than ever before. In the past, if you wanted to change a price on a product category, it would take you a month or 2 months before that price hit in the market. Today, it's almost instantaneous. And I think that's how you should think about it.
Wow, dynamic pricing. We only heard that in hotels and airlines. Now
airlines, absolutely.
Now you have that in FMCG, that potential. Yes. To sum up, I think direct to consumer, or as Shiv has coined this new term, discovery to consumption brands have kind of totally given us a new playbook. And I mean, it's pretty exciting what's going on here. I think there's so many strands worth exploring, which we need to probably revisit again in another discussion. So thank you so much, Shiv, and thank you so much, Shankar, for this very interesting discussion.
Thank you, Shankar and Chitra.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.